Hello Math 1040 students. The purpose of this video is to help you with the fourth part of the tuberculosis data project. This will be the last part that requires any data calculation or organization. The last part of the project, part 5, will ask you to take the previous 4 parts and put it all together into one document once everything is fixed up. This part will have 4 sections to it. Part A will ask you to make a contingency table for the success rate data that you have in part 1. For every single one of your 10 countries, you calculated and gathered 2 values from the tuberculosis profile page. For example, for Afghanistan, you calculated the rate per 100,000 population, and you also calculated the success rate for that country. These success rates are the values that we need. For example, Afghanistan has a success rate of 91%. What I'm going to do using this table is record each of my countries, and then the success and failure out of 100. For example, they have Cambodia has 94 successes and 6 failures. That comes from the fact that Cambodia, at the time that this was collected, had a success rate of 94%. For Afghanistan, which would have a success rate of 91%, that means they'd have 91 successes out of 100, and the remaining 9 of 100, or 100 minus 91, would be the failures. You're going to do that for each of your 10 countries. We also ask that you copy this table or make a copy of it in Word. The picture here is not really copyable, so you'll need to construct this yourself. In order to do that, keep in mind here that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and possibly 5 columns if you would like to include this one on the far left that says member of WHO. In order to make that table, we can go into Word, go into Insert, and then select Table. This will allow us to create a table of whatever kind we want. For example, we want 5 columns, so I go over 5, and we're going to need as many rows as we want. Specifically, we need at least 10 just for the countries, but more for the titles as well. So right now, I'll just make it 5 by 8. If I want more rows than this, all I need to do is go to the last box in this table and hit Tab on your keyboard. That will make another line, and you can continuously hit Tab to create more and more rows. You can later remove rows if necessary. If we want to copy what the project looks like, note that we have basically 2 rows of titles, one that has success, failure, and total, and one above that that says treatment, success, and failure. If I want something like that, that means I'm going to make sure the top 2 rows are titles and fill it in accordingly. I also might want to reduce the size of this far left column and keep all the other ones about the same size. In order to do that, I can minimize this one on the far left and then adjust accordingly to try to keep these around the same size. If you want, you can go into the table properties specifically to make sure these are the same size, but that's not exactly necessary. I want to have these 2 boxes say treatment and success, or specifically treatment, success, and failure. So I'm going to highlight these 2 boxes, right-click, and go to merge cells. These will combine them to create one box, and now I can have treatment, success, and failure. And the boxes below that say success and failure. From the rest, I also need total to the side of success and failure, and then I should have my 10 countries listed below success and failure. So I'm going to have total over here, and then my countries here. So for example, Afghanistan, maybe I have also Iran, maybe I also have China, or maybe the Philippines, or maybe Australia. And I can continue to put all 10 countries in. Here I have 4, then I have my 5th, my 6th, my 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th. I would also need one more row below that to include totals, as per my picture. I want totals below all those as well. So total. You will put in your successes and failures. As we saw for Afghanistan, had 91% success rate, so that means it had 91 successes and 9 failures out of 100 total. And I'll continue to do the same for all my other countries. All the totals for each of these countries should be 100. The table also has this as well. So these should be easy to work with, making the percentage very nice. And overall, your total amount should be 1,000. Once you have all the successes and failures in, you can total those up and see how many total successes and how many total failures there were. At this point, this table is fine, but if you want to do some more adjustments to it, for example, on our picture, we have member of WHO to the left of my country list. So I can do the same here and combine these boxes using merge cells. And then I can have member of WHO. That might not be in the orientation you want. They had it listed in vertical fashion, and that's pretty easy to fix. You can also just right click on that box and go to text direction. That will allow you to reorient the text in whatever way you want. For example, this way vertically. And now it says member of WHO. You can also do some other things if you want to hide some of these boxes. That's not exactly necessary, but it's up there if you want to. What you would do is highlight whatever box you want to mess with and then go to the borders option at the top right and decide what borders it has. For example, if I take away all borders, then it doesn't have any. Or if I make it so it has a right border and it has a bottom border, and that means all those boxes do not have any inner borders, but they have the bottom and the right so that everything else is still enclosed. However, again, that is not exactly necessary. I'd recommend everything else here you should work on. If you want to make it maybe look a little bit nicer, you can also do some stuff where you highlight, and maybe when you go to home, you can centralize these. Maybe that looks nicer to you. It's up to you. Or we do ask that you make this box. I recommend not making it in Excel and then trying to copy that over. It tends not to look very good. That's going to be what you do for the first one. For the second one, you're going to calculate a few probabilities. The first is the randomly selected case from the first or third member of the WHO in your table. So you look at your first row and you look at your second row, and you add those totals together out of the 1,000. That should be that probability. The second one, for randomly selected case from the third member of WHO in your member or is a failure, then you can look at the total amount from the third row and then the total amount from the failures. Add those together out of 1,000, but then also take out the combination of the two. These should work very similar to your homework for probability questions. Just keep in mind some of the wording here. For example, or implies that you add some probabilities together, but you need to make sure that you subtract away any combination. When it says stuff like given, that implies you're not talking about all of the 1,000 in my overall sample anymore. You're talking about, for example, in this case, given it is a failure, you should be using however total amount of failures you have in your case. B should be a lot of the probability situations. C and D will then ask you to calculate a confidence interval and a hypothesis test. For both of these, you can assume all the conditions are met, so you do not need to check the 4 conditions. But for both of these, you're going to be looking at the difference between the third and the fifth members in the WHO of your table, which means you're going to be looking at the proportion of successes in your third country and the proportion of successes in your fifth country. And you're going to be subtracting those proportions. You can, when you make your confidence interval, you can work with that in GeoGebra and the same in your hypothesis test, and please include a picture of your GeoGebra output. So for example, in GeoGebra, we have z-test difference of proportions for a hypothesis test for 2 proportions, and we have z-estimate difference of proportions for confidence interval of 2 proportions. Make sure you work through both of these programs and input the values accordingly and take a picture of the output. Also keep in mind for both parts C and D that you are going to be asked not only to create the confidence interval hypothesis test, but also to interpret the confidence interval and also to give the hypotheses, the test statistic, the p-value, and your overall decision in context. Overall, this is probably one of the lighter of the assignments you've had for the projects. Shouldn't take too long, particularly since you already should have your percentages for all 10 countries from the first part of your project. So you should not need to have to go to the TB profile pages anymore. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me outside of class or put a comment in the announcement for this video. Otherwise, have a great rest of your day.